Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Liberty in Europe with the Bitcoin couple. I am Andreas Cole, and tonight we'll be starting without the Melza. She's going to be a bit late. Our guest is Judd Bagley, the Director of Communications at Overstock.com. And thank you for joining us, Mr. Bagley.
Oh, thank you. And it's an honor to be here on your show.
Can you tell us a bit about Overstock for people who might not know much about it? And oh, sorry, 1 second. And can you tell us one way, because this is Liberty.me, can you tell us one way Overstock has helped advance the cause of liberty recently?
Of course. So let me go back to the beginning. Overstock.com was created in 1999. Originally, the company was conceived of out of the wreckage of the dot-com boom. So you had a lot of those early internet retailers that were going bankrupt in late 1999, 2000, 2001, and they had a lot of inventory that they had to liquidate as part of those bankruptcies. And so Overstock.com was kind of conceived as an outlet, as a channel for liquidating failed .com retailers' inventories. Mm-hmm. So we started out basically on that kind of on an Overstock. That was kind of the basis of the company for quite a while, but we've slowly transitioned into more of a first-run retailer. So we basically have the same things that Amazon has. It's all first-run stuff, and so, but we've held on to the name Amazon, or rather Overstock.com. So one of the things that makes this company especially unique is our leadership. The company was founded by a gentleman by the name of Patrick Byrne. He's a PhD he has advanced degrees in mathematics, economics, philosophy. He was for a time a professor of Chinese, so he's very well versed in Asian culture and Asian studies. And I'll tell you why that's important in a second. And I should also point out that he's very libertarian in his politics personally. So the company is very much kind of an extension of his personality. So there are a lot of things that we do as a company, just because it's the right thing to do. And one of those things has included, in about 2004, our CEO became aware of some misbehavior that was taking place on Wall Street. It was kind of a form of manipulative stock trading that was harming small public companies, and in fact killing many small public companies. So he was very public in his fight to end the practice. So keep that in mind too, as I go on to explain that. Then in about 2012, Patrick first became familiar with Bitcoin. And so this appealed to him as somebody with libertarian political leanings. And libertarians, of course, place high value in the idea of gold as a store of currency from becoming inflationary. So he decided that it would be a good idea for Overstock to support this new cryptocurrency movement. And in 2014, we became the first major online retailer to accept Bitcoin as a form of payment. So that happened in early 2014, and it's been a great success. Then a few months into that experiment, somebody asked Patrick why he didn't consider creating an alternative stock exchange based on the same technology that powers Bitcoin. And we sort of looked at each other and thought, that's something we should probably investigate. So we spent a bit of time, looking into it, and came to the conclusion that it was something that had the capacity to be viable. And so in October of last year, almost exactly 1 year ago, we formally launched our crypto securities, or crypto, or like digital asset exchange initiative, which we call T0. So why I went to great pains to point out all of Patrick's his educational background is just to make the case that he is one of the few people that has a real solid understanding of the actual mathematics that provide the cryptographic foundation of Bitcoin, because he studied this. His understanding of globalism and global markets made it very apparent to him that Bitcoin itself was a good way of facilitating exchange of value across borders very easily. And his economic philosophy made it clear to him that combined with his political philosophy made it clear that this could be a very much kind of a freedom-enhancing form of currency, and that we should take the power of cryptocurrency and use it to find solutions to the problems facing Wall Street, which we became aware of because of our experience as a public company. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is you take all these factors and they all kind of come together, and it's sort of a perfect storm scenario where he is probably the perfect person to be taking this, cause up. So within that answer, I hope I've also answered the question of what Overstock has done to promote freedom. I believe that our support of the cryptocurrency movement generally, and of creating, so supporting Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general, and then also creating this alternative stock exchange that's in development, are both probably pretty strong freedom-enhancing moves that we're pretty proud of.
I agree.
Hi, I'm sorry for coming late. My name's Demelza Hayes, and I'm the co-host who's been emailing you.
It's nice to finally meet you, Demelza.
Yeah, thank you for coming on today. And I guess that he asked you the question, have you recently advanced Liberty? And I think Overstock.com is doing such a fantastic job towards advancing Liberty. So many people have found out about these ideas just through Overstock.com, so that's just really fantastic. Really appreciate all of the work you guys are doing.
No, and I got to tell you, it's one of the great things about working here is when you work for a fellow like Patrick Byrne, it feels more than just a job. It feels like a mission. Like there's actual deeper philosophical, liberty promoting things we have to do here. So it makes coming to work actually exciting and enjoyable.
Right. So obviously we're very much in favor of Bitcoin. We're known as the Bitcoin couple. But can you explain just from your perspective, because people value Bitcoin for different reasons, why is Bitcoin important to you? What about Bitcoin is important to Overstock?
One of the things that we've said here many times since we first became aware of Bitcoin and became promoters of this movement is the idea that currency as a tool, as a mode of value exchange, is too important a thing to be left in the hands of
Is that on our end?
a free market. In those markets, the currency itself should not be under the control of government bureaucrats who can, with the swipe of a pen, suddenly create $700 billion, for example, as has been the case in this country in the past few years. So that in and of itself is kind of a big deal. This kind of currency this mode of value exchange is something that gets down, avoids these levels of bureaucracy that have a tendency to mess things up, and can create more perfect and free markets. So, and not only that, but it can operate between and across frontiers and borders and these kind of artificial political units that we've created. And one of the things that Overstock does, we really believe in creating economic opportunity for people in developing countries. These are often countries where, because of corruption on the part of governments, the government aid that tries to go out to these countries is often squandered and goes to the people who need it least. We feel like the real solution to promoting economic development in developing nations is entrepreneurism. It's not government aid. So we have a system called Worldstock where we directly import the handcrafted goods of artisans in these nations, and we do this for no profit. So we just cover our expenses and then we return everything to the artisans who make this stuff. Well, one of the problems is there are so many other people that we could be doing work with, but they're unbanked. They don't have access to banks because banks can't be trusted. They're unstable. You know, all those reasons. Well, Bitcoin and the idea that we can transfer value to somebody for the work they do simply but through a text message, for example, or just as long, you know, if they have access to a cell phone, which pretty much everybody does these days, that's very empowering. I mean, this is the kind of system that's going to bring nations out of poverty and out of that cycle of dependency on foreign aid.
Does Overstock.com pay some of the Worldstock suppliers with Bitcoin, or is it helping to help the unbanked in developing countries, or?
That's a very good question. We're not there yet. This is something we're working on. Yeah, we're trying to.
Oh, cool.
That's going to happen, but we're not quite there yet. But this is an example. This is the kind of thing.
Yeah.
That can move value directly to the people who need it, and whose economic success can buoy up nations that are still developing. So, yeah.
I think I did read that Overstock is paying some bonuses to its employees in Bitcoin. Is that correct? I don't know. Are they still doing that, or?
You know, it's interesting. This is a real source of frustration for us right now. We began the process of figuring out how we could do that, and everything seemed pretty easy until we discovered two things. One is the IRS considers Bitcoin to be property, not currency. So there are really complex tax implications involved when you're paying somebody in property instead of currency. And so we figured out a way around that, but then that would have turned us into a money transmitter, it's called, which involves, again, whole levels of bureaucracy and there were new licenses that we had to get, and it was really complicated in terms of like paying people. So we're based in Utah in the United States. We do have employees in other states, and so we were going to have to become money transmitters in all these different states. Anyway, this is still something we're also still working on. We're just trying to find a way that the process of doing it won't eat up all the benefit that would otherwise come from these bonuses. So yeah, we're not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that brings me to my next question. You might have already partially answered it, but what is slowing down or stopping the adoption of Bitcoin? If it's such a revolutionary currency, why is consumer adoption so slow?
Yeah, you know, we have really long and interesting and smart-sounding conversations about this, but in the end, it's difficult to know completely. Right. My standard for widespread consumer adoption is would my parents use it? They're in their mid to late 50s. Is this something they would use? And right now the answer is a clear no, they would not. And there are two reasons. One is they don't understand it, and the other reason is because of some of the earliest Bitcoin-related headlines, at least here in the United States, had to do with things like Silk Road and Bitcoin being a mode of being the currency of choice for drug dealers and people selling AK-47s, and then Mt. Gox, what appeared to be hacking, but now appears like it's more likely was fraud. So they are. The combination of not understanding it and those being their primary points of reference are making this difficult. What I believe is that the key to Bitcoin adoption, to widespread consumer Bitcoin adoption, will actually be the adoption of what we're calling the Bitcoin 2.0 applications. So that's using the blockchain to disintermediate the intermediaries and the friction inducing the friction creating intermediaries in transactions. So my parents, for example, were recently looking to buy, and they were selling their home and they were buying another one. And as you know, one of these, when you're buying a home and you look at all the closing costs and everything go along, you often see this thing like $1,500 for a title transfer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's kind of, that's ridiculous, especially when you dig in and you find out that's a teenager going down to some, government office and and doing a search, and that's about it.
Yeah.
One of the really interesting applications of the blockchain outside of Bitcoin that's already getting some traction is this idea of property title transfer. So I asked my parents, I said, if you could save, say, $1,000 or $1,200 on this transaction, when you have to transfer the property title, and all you need to know is it would be done a different way, a way that uses math to ensure that the transaction is legitimate and valid, would you do it? And they said, of course we would. So it occurs to me that it's very likely that as people latch on to these Bitcoin 2.0 applications, over time they will come to then learn, oh, you mean there's a way that I can transfer currency? I mean, there's a currency that uses the same thing. I think that's then when people will start to use it. It will seem very natural for them at that point. So I think that the Bitcoin 2.0 applications are the way to get people comfortable with the regular Bitcoin, use the primary Bitcoin application. And the next question is obviously, how long will that take? Difficult to answer. All I know is about 2 years ago when we first started looking at this, there were no Bitcoin 2.0 applications of any, that were worth mentioning. And now there are. I mean, it's like Silicon Valley in 1994. I mean, that's where all the venture money's going. So clearly, and hopefully in the next couple of years, we can have this conversation again, and my parents will be using Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Great. So can you tell us how colored coin technology comes into all of this?
So colored coin has developed what's called the open assets transfer the open asset protocol or open asset transfer protocol. It's one of the two. I think it's the open asset transfer protocol, which is a very secure means of transferring digital assets, and that can be a lot of things. The way we're applying the open asset transfer protocol, again, I hope that's what it's called, is in the transfer of digital assets that take the form of shares of public companies. So we've created a platform. We're calling it T0, and I'll explain why we call it T0. Currently, when you trade, if you sell stock that you own in a public company, it takes 3 days for the trade to settle. In other words, it'll be 3 days before the money reaches your account. They call that T+3. That means trade date plus 3. What we've found is that using the blockchain, as we say, the trade is the settlement. So the act of trading is concurrently the act of settling, which means trade settle immediately or T+0. So T0 is what we're calling this. So Overstock has applied to the SEC to issue several $1 million worth of shares of the company that would be issued in a digital form, purely digital form. We've also acquired an interest in an existing what's called an alternative trading system. So it's a stock trading system that exists outside the the NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange and the Deutsche Börse and all that. And it would these shares would trade exclusively on that platform in the same way that Bitcoin trades. So you would have shares which would exist as digitized tokens, again akin to a Bitcoin, and then you would have essentially digital tokens that would represent U.S. dollars, and then those things would move from account to account instantly, in the same way that Bitcoin currently moves from wallet to wallet.
Are you referring to PeerNova?
Well, so that's another interesting question. So PeerNova that's a company that Overstock has made a venture investment in, and we're using them to actually build out some of the software that we're using.
Okay, but that's not the name of that's not the company that's not the alternative trading mechanism that you're talking about, though.
No, we're calling it T0.
Oh, T0. Okay.
Right, but PeerNova is a company based in San Jose or Palo Alto that is creating software around using the Bitcoin for creating Bitcoin 2.0 applications. So yeah, we invested about $5 million in them, and then we're also using them to create some of our software to make this whole digital trade happen. Now, the colored coins, again, is we've used an implementation of that to take advantage of their open asset transfer protocol, which is also part of this. Turns out it's a little complicated, but but once you get over a few humps, then it becomes pretty easy to leverage the power of these existing platforms.
Well, okay, so I was doing a little bit of research and I read that NASDAQ is also trying to use the open assets protocol and colored coins in order to digitalize their stock trading. So does Project, I guess this is all under the umbrella of Project Medici, is that correct?
Exactly.
So is Project Medici trying to compete with NASDAQ or just put pressure on NASDAQ to, to evolve their settlement clearance process?
Very good question. It's impossible to know when NASDAQ first started having these conversations, but we have it on fairly decent knowledge that they are actually trying to compete with us.
Okay.
So we began the process. We believe we began the process of working this out before NASDAQ made their announcement. Now, here's a difference. NASDAQ is not trying to cannibalize its own trading, so it's not like existing public companies would then trade on their digital platform. Instead, what they're trying to do is create a supplement. Companies that have yet to go public would trade their pre-IPO shares. So, you may know, for example, Facebook is a good example. Before Facebook went public, there were a lot of their early employees and founders that had shares of Facebook that had value, and they wanted to trade them, and they had to find some kind of a marketplace in which to trade them. Those were pre-IPO shares, and then when the company went public, those pre-IPO shares were turned into regular stock. So NASDAQ wants to create a venue for trading those kind of pre-IPO shares. Now, as it happens, T0 will also accommodate trading of shares of pre-IPO shares. So we will be competing on that front. But otherwise, whereas we're going to also take shares of existing public companies, we won't be competing with NASDAQ on that. But we do like to think that our efforts in this area and the noise that we were making early on sort of spawned or got other people moving and investigating this and doing work on it, which we think is great. Actually, it's kind of a it's a huge market, so we don't mind having some competition. And in fact, when an entity like NASDAQ throws its hat in the ring, it only helps us because it legitimizes this. It's probably tougher for somebody to latch on to this kind of a project being done by an internet retailer, but when they hear about the same sort of work being done by NASDAQ, which does nothing but trading, it sort of legitimizes this effort. So we're glad to have them in this space too.
Yeah, I was reading that one of the developers of Counterparty, Robbie Dermond, he was saying that the transaction cost of using Bitcoin 2.0 to settle trades would be about 80% less than the current depository trust and clearing corporation cost. And that just seems like a lot less, and it's almost unbelievable because I think I was reading that the DTCC approximately each transaction costs 3.5 cents to go through their whole system. So I mean, a reduction of 80% of that cost would be less than a penny to basically trade a security.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is the essence of what cryptography can do. You have we have Visa, for example. Visa exists because when you're making an exchange, like, and if I don't know you and you don't know me, and we don't trust each other, but we both trust Visa. So Visa steps in the middle to mediate that exchange, but they have to make it worth their while. So they, there's all this they have to do, and they take their part. Now, with this crypto movement, there's no more needing to. I mean, it doesn't matter if I trust you and you don't trust me, as long as we both trust math. As long as we both have trust in the idea that 1 + 1 = 2, anywhere in the universe and forever, we can. It's easy to remove these entities that had otherwise been mediating these exchanges. So this is just one example of many. Another one, in fact, there's a company, I'm sure you've heard of them, that is working with the nation of, well, I don't know if I can even say which nation, but let's say it's a developing nation with a democracy that's very fragile, and one where vote fraud is often alleged, and they're working out a way to move voting to the blockchain. So every vote would be cast and would be registered on the blockchain. And if you can imagine that the cost of that's going to have to be, it's going to have to not cost much, because this isn't a nation that has a lot of money to spend on this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. You know, the potential for carrying out transactions cryptographically using the blockchain for very, very low cost is enormous. And 80% is actually what we're shooting for too. 80% less than the status quo. Mm-hmm. So that's very, very reasonable and attainable.
Do you have any doubts at all about Bitcoin, maybe emerging from the recent block size debate or anything like that?
You know, it's interesting. When you see these debates going back and forth and being intractable, and this idea of the fork and all that, sometimes you think that the only solution is going to be for there to be, you know, parallel systems, and I have yet to decide whether that's going to be good. That's going to be good or bad. We obviously have all these altcoins that you hear about every now and then, like the Litecoin and the Dogecoin and whatever, and they're mostly kind of you know, amusing, I guess, at this point, and interesting, but nobody takes them really that seriously yet. So I don't know what effect a fork of Bitcoin would actually have. And it seems, though, given on a long enough timeline, that seems like an inevitability. That eventually it's the sort of thing that is going to happen. So I don't, you know, I'll tell you one concern I have is one of Bitcoin's greatest strengths is its community, but that also is one of its greatest weaknesses is the fact that decisions are made, are distributed, and there's no firm hierarchy as far as these things go. So yeah, I'd like to know what you guys think, because I hear really convincing opinions on both sides. What do you guys think?
Well, as far as if we're going to be using Bitcoin in order to clear and settle transactions, it would be important to keep transaction costs low. So if the transaction costs increase over time, and then it would be almost more cost effective to use the DTCC or, you know, Visa, as you know, in different. I mean, the transaction costs could go up a lot if we can only process 7 transactions per second,
right,
in the blockchain. So I think, I mean, it has to increase if we're going to be able to compete. So
I agree. Yeah, that's a great point.
I think we've come to a point where the debate isn't as much about whether we should raise the block size, but when and how, and there's really communities being torn apart online by that.
I agree, and you can't. I just don't know how you convince people. Yeah, I mean, this is such a. It almost becomes like debates over religion and politics. In fact, it gets nastier at times. So for the same reason I avoid debates over religion and politics, I've come to avoid debates over the block size, because it's discouraging and confusing for me. So yeah, but I do think that in order for markets to be truly so, you know, one of the functions of a market is price discovery, right? And so in order for a market to be efficient in its price discovery function, liquidity has to be very high. So, you know, people have to be able to respond to new information in the market quickly and nimbly in order for you know, price discovery to be efficient. That will never happen at a rate of 7 trades per second. It probably won't happen at a rate of 1,000 trades per second. So I think that alt chains, or, you know, private blockchains, confederated network blockchains are going to be indispensable. All this Bitcoin 2.0 technology will not be able to, you know, come to fruition on the blockchain proper. So I think people need to accept the idea that it's going to have to happen on side chains. The risk there is people then when you say that, people interpret that as expressing doubt in the viability of Bitcoin itself, which is not, that's not it at all. It's just saying that that in order for markets to really function the way we hope they do, and for this technology to be accepted the way we hope it do, and for then in the long term Bitcoin the currency to be accepted, we have to move some of these functions off the blockchain.
Yeah, there's just so much love to go around. We need more than the blockchain.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I was writing a paper about naked short selling over the summer while I was at the Mises Institute, and I read a lot about Overstock.com. I guess they've claimed that they were a victim of naked short selling in a couple years ago, maybe 2005 or earlier, I think.
Yeah, that's when it started. You're right.
Yeah. So I guess my questions about that is, well, if we were to trade on Bitcoin 2.0, would naked short selling still be possible? Like, could that still plague?
Well, so it's interesting you asked that, because the thing that actually got us looking at this very seriously, the essence of naked short selling is the idea that certain bad actors in the market figured out a way to sell the same share of stock multiple times. Now, this was in the context of a short sell. So when you sell the same share of stock many times, that has the effect of and that's not just the same share being sold by this person to this person who sells it. Instead, it was the same person selling the same share of stock there, and there, which, for reasons that are probably, there's no time to explain right now, the market has a way of accommodating that, and it in turn has the effect of artificially increasing the supply of stock, which has a depressive effect on price. It's basic supply and demand. So what really got us thinking about using Bitcoin using Bitcoin technology to create an alternate stock exchange is the fact that, for the same reason you cannot double spend a Bitcoin, it's the same cryptography that keeps that from happening is the same thing that's going to keep you from being able to sell the same share of stock many times on our platform. Now, that's not to say we don't allow short selling. We're actually in the process, and today are rolling out a really interesting new product that will facilitate short selling, but it'll be completely legal, transparent, above board short selling. So yeah, we're not doing this to avoid shorting. We're just doing this to make sure that it can be done, but it will be done legally and appropriately. But so yeah, to answer your question then, it's that the fact that you can't, it's the preventing double spending of Bitcoin is also going to prevent the double selling of stock that is the essence of naked short selling.
Okay, well that's really great, because then that would that would eliminate a lot of the problems that I think investors have with the current clearance and settlement system in the stock market.
We've also figured out a way to, I don't know if you've read the book Flash Boys, or how familiar you are with the high frequency trading.
Yeah, high frequency trading, right. Mm-hmm.
But in essence, so what these guys have figured out how to do is how to tease out signals sent by those who are about to make purchases in the market. So those are going to sell. Those who are going to purchase shares, they send out little signals, which, if you react fast enough, you can actually get ahead of them, buy those shares up before they do, and then sell that to them and take out some of their margin. We figured out a way to keep that from happening as well. So it increases fairness on multiple levels, and it keeps multiple market ills that are just kind of endemic to the way current markets work. It keeps happening. So we think that investors are going to find this to be a very they're really going to be happy about this, and if that's where investors want to do their trading, that's going to kind of oblige market issuers, those companies that issue stock. It will oblige them to issue some shares on our platform. And
it would be in their best interest too, because then they wouldn't become a victim of naked short selling, which could potentially depress the price of their stock, right? Firms should have an incentive to issue stocks on a traceable and transparent market, just because they'll be able to know if more shares are being issued than what they issued.
Exactly. So for the same way that you can work out at any one time exactly what the balance of every Bitcoin wallet is, just by going back through to the Genesis trade on the blockchain into today, is the same kind of reasoning will make it absolutely clear exactly where it won't be clear who owns each of these wallets. I mean, that's information we'll have. That won't be available to the market, but it will be obvious. It'll be easy to account for all your shares and know that they're not being traded abusively on the platform.
Mhm.
Very good question, by the way.
Can you tell us about any obstacles or bumps along the road you've had, losses in Q1, for example?
So as losses in Q1 as Overstock, or
as in the crypto losses?
Oh yeah. So that's yeah, that actually did. There was a little bit of that actually wasn't, well, okay, let me back up. Pretty much everybody that was buying Bitcoin in say January of 2014 is experienced losses, because that's what it was like, $1,200 Bitcoin. So yeah, we've had some losses along the way. We've also, but we've been acquiring Bitcoin very consistently as we go. About 10% of it Overstock, 10% of the revenue that comes in through Bitcoin, we retain. The rest we have to convert to dollars, because there's no, we can't pay our suppliers, we can't pay the light bills or our taxes or anything with Bitcoin, unfortunately. So, but we retain about 10%. So if you dollar cost average that over time, I think we're probably doing okay. Where the losses have been some of the altcoins that we purchased early on, that we've been selling over time, that have lost value. So Bitcoin is not, yeah, our losses of crypto have not been have really not been realized because of Bitcoin's change in value. It's been through some of the altcoins we purchased. So, and and the thing is, we're really not, that doesn't concern people here, because we feel like people who get caught up on the value of Bitcoin are kind of missing the point. It's this is a revolution, and the value is going to fluctuate and whatever, but we feel like it's here to stay. So we like to continue supporting Bitcoin just out of principle. So we'll continue to buy it.
So I read that Overstock also holds gold and silver. So how do you decide which altcoin to decide, which commodity to buy in? What's your criterion?
That's one of those things that that my boss works out. So I don't have the answer to that. As far as I know that we were buying some altcoins early on, just kind of out of curiosity, and again as an effort to kind of demonstrate broader support to the demonstrate support to the broader movement. As far as what when we buy gold and silver and when we sell, I don't know. So don't know.
Well, getting back to the obstacles question, I was wondering if you've had any regulatory difficulty, because okay, it's really difficult to even make another stock exchange that's going to compete with NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. It's difficult to do that even using the current technology. So you want to use a new technology, which might revolutionize the industry. So is there any kind of, are there people that are trying to stop Overstock.com from doing that?
It's interesting. We'll get kind of anecdotal stories here and there from people who are saying, well, I know that such and such a bank knows what you're doing, and they've said they're going to do anything to stop you. I don't know. I tend to think that these multi-billion-dollar banks are probably not at this point too concerned about us, especially when most of them are at least investigating using the blockchain for exchange of value of. So yeah, I tend to not believe too much in that stuff. Now, what we have experienced though is the SEC. This is, it's kind of it's an interesting situation because during the naked short selling days, when as we were trying to raise awareness of it with the SEC and we got nowhere, and we've been very critical of the SEC as a regulator over time, and so it's a little now back to them and trying to work with them. The good news is this seems to be a very different regulatory regime that's in place right now. These are folks who actually recognize that this is the future of business, and they know it's inevitable. They want to get it right. So there's a process by which we would submit a document basically saying our intention is to sell digital shares of Overstock, and then then what they do is they send questions back to us that they have, and then it's our job to then respond to those questions by amending the thing we sent them. We send it back in, and then they have questions, and then we go. So it goes back and forth like this. Now, by all accounts, this is the sort of thing that shouldn't take longer than maybe 2 or 3 rounds of back and forth. We're currently on our 4th, and I think we might be working on our 5th round of questions with the SEC on this. Now, we don't think that they're trying to obstruct us. We think they just want to understand it. And so we're being patient with them, and they're being patient with us, and we're quite confident that we will, we'll get through this process, and the whole market will be better off for it. So, we sort of view ourselves as pioneers in this area. Like, we want to get this done and be the trailblazers that then make it easy for other people to follow up. So, you ask if those are obstacles. I guess in a way it is, because all things considered, we'd like to be accepting millions of trades from the public already, and we're not because of the regulators, but we don't believe that they're intentionally being an obstacle. They're just trying to be cautious.
No, it's completely understandable. They would have so much backlash if they take the wrong step with Bitcoin, because there's so many different policies regarding Bitcoin and all the different levels of government. So do you have any firms that have already said they're interested in possibly using Project Medici to issue shares, or?
Yeah, a ton, and most of them are actually they're companies that have yet to go public. They've reached that stage of investment where the next step is to either be acquired or to enter the public equity markets, and there are a lot of companies that are afraid to go public because of the depredations of the expense. It's very expensive under the status quo, and B, there are those predatory short sellers that are just licking their chops, waiting for them to come along so they can take advantage of them. So yeah, the greatest interest so far has been expressed by companies that are not yet public and are afraid to go public under the status quo. And then we hear, every now and then from companies that have said they, as soon as this thing's ready, they'd like to hear more. And it's one of those things where when you are a public company, there's not a lot you can say for fear that it might be interpreted as trying to influence the price of the stock. So we hear very little we hear much less from existing public companies as compared to companies that would like to investigate using Medici, using the T0 platform to go for their initial public offering.
Nice. So is all of this technology going to be available to European businesses as well, or initially will it just be the US?
That is a really good question, and we bounce that around a lot, and that is the question of does the borderless nature of cryptocurrency lend itself also to what we're doing here, and we don't immediately see any reason why overseas companies couldn't be able to exchange shares on T0 in the same way that Overstock shares will occasionally be traded on the Hong Kong market or on Deutsche Börse or European. So the thing is, it would take these companies specifically issuing shares onto T0. So it's not like an
Sure.
owner. They're not fungible, in other words. So it's not like an owner could buy them on one exchange and then come over and sell them on ours. It's kind of a closed system in that way. But yeah, we like to think that this will be like the first, truly that this should be an international exchange. Now, having said that, I also know it's not that simple, and the attorneys keep saying it's not that simple as with anything. So, but hopefully we get to that. I mean, we all are hoping that this becomes a truly international platform of exchange.
Sure, but there's a lot of jurisdictional issues with going international, aren't there?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I also. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead,
I was
Andreas.
just going to mention that we might open this to Q&A. If you want to type in your questions, we'll ask them at the end of our session.
Yeah, I've got 15 minutes, so I love
Okay.
the
I also wanted to ask, in July, I think I read on a Coindesk.com released an article about how Overstock.com released crypto bonds, 5 million worth of crypto bonds.
Right. So the regulations governing the sale of bonds, which, as I'm sure you know, are debt instruments. So public companies can raise money in one of two ways. They can sell shares, or they can sell debt. And the regulations governing the exchange of shares are quite extensive. And so we encountered. We found that the SEC had these questions, and it became apparent that we were not going to be selling shares that Overstock shares were not going to be trading as quickly as we'd hoped on T0. So we decided one thing we would do in order to prove the concept, and indeed demonstrate to the SEC that the safety and security of using blockchain technology for this kind of work, was we would sell Overstock bonds on T0. Now the SEC has nothing. There's nothing they could say to stop us from doing that. So Overstock put out a prospectus saying that we were willing to sell up to $25 million in bonds. The first bond was sold to our own CEO. He bought a $500,000 bond, followed shortly by a company called First New York Securities. They bought $5 million in bonds, and the transactions went off perfectly, and there they are. So it's in part this is to sort of demonstrate to the world that this is legitimate, that this is a concept that's been proved, and also to show it's also kind of to demonstrate this to the SEC.
Okay, and all those transactions were recorded on the Bitcoin blockchain?
Exactly, using the Open Assets Transfer Protocol.
Wow, that's really incredible. Is Overstock.com the only firm that's done anything like that so far, or is this more common? I just haven't heard about it.
We were the first to do this. Robbie Dermody, the fellow with Symbiont you referred to, they worked out a deal where they actually got their investors, the people that invested in their company bought a form of a bond, which was then published to the blockchain. So they did something like this, but I don't know. It's been explained to me by someone who was actually an investor, and I don't know, it didn't seem to matter a ton. But the point is, they've done something similar to this, though not quite the same. And this seems to be indicative of the niche of the market that they're going to occupy, which will be more self-executing contracts, or these kinds of transactions, not so much traditional, debt equity, like public companies. Like that's what we're hoping to. We're going to accommodate that sector of the market.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't seem like we have any questions from the audience yet.
I think we've covered everything. You guys ask great questions.
Is there any timeline as to when you think this T0 will be up and running?
Well, it's as far as we're concerned, it's working. It's just that it's not it's not available to you, for example. So we've tested it internally and it works. It's just we have to get the full regulatory approval, and we believe we're getting pretty close. We're hesitant to kind of publicly refer to any specific dates because, you know, we just want to make it clear we're going to do whatever it takes to make the SEC satisfied with this process and what we're doing. So we don't want to act like we're tapping our toes and waiting for them to get off their butts. It's not like that. I don't want to go any further. Just to say it all depends on when the SEC goes, gives us the go ahead. But of course we're hoping it's not too much longer. So that's it's kind of out of our hands right now.
Sure. Well, I'm really looking forward to more updates from Overstock.com, and this was really exciting. I'm really glad that you had time to come on. And so the past couple of years I've switched to using Overstock.com. Amazon was my go-to, and I just went there because I don't know, I didn't know anything about this, deep capture or naked short selling. I had never heard about it, but now I always recommend Overstock.com, and I just think it's really, really a great business, a great company. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Well, thank you. Spread the word, and as we will spread the word about about this show, which I've really enjoyed being on.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bagley.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I'll see everyone next week.
Okay. See
Thanks
everybody
for
next
coming.
week. Bye-bye.